wanted to talk to you guys about some of the plans that have been derailed a little bit. I've inspected at this point probably 11 or 12 vans. They've all been in very, very bad condition. Some have been in good condition. I got a little bit better at qualifying the sellers when I'm calling them, which is what I'm going to be talking to you guys about that today, in case you yourself are looking for a van. But so I went and I've gone to a bunch of sellers. I've driven multiple hours. I got fed up and I ended up going to, so I'm in South Florida. I ended up driving 12 hours north to visit a friend and figured that I would, kill two birds with one stone and get myself to look at some vans and see if I could see anything up there that was maybe a little bit better. Because I went to see a lot of vans down here, and a lot of the sellers, for some reason, are extremely shady. Some of them, so there was one who he had the title, but he was a title jumper. And so a title jumper is basically a person who buys a van and then instantly tries to sell it, even though he never transferred the title under his name. So it's technically under the previous owner's name. And that's extremely shady. And so because of that, I ended up avoiding dealing with that guy completely. He was 2 hours away. He didn't tell me that. He said that it was a clean title under his name and everything before I went. That was a little annoying. There was another guy who I went to see the van. That one was in great condition, but he didn't have the title. So I drove an hour and 50 minutes to go look at this van, and he ended up not having the title. That was before I started qualifying them. And now I've gotten a little bit better. I have a bunch of questions that I ask before I even consider going to look at a van. I'm going to give you guys the questions here because it's going to save you guys a lot of headache without having to drive multiple hours to look at a van, to then find out you ultimately can't take it, and ultimately having to drive back without the van and spending all this money. I've spent quite a bit of money on gas and all this, so my ultimate solution now is I'm just going to buy a van from a dealer. I'm going to buy a newer van, a lower mileage van, because I have a full-time job and I don't have any debt. I'm officially debt-free. I have zero credit card debt whatsoever, which is amazing. And I don't even have a car payment or anything. I'm going to, this is my mom's car. I took over the payments for a little while, but everything's still under her name and she wants the car back. So I'm gonna just get myself a van. Either that or I just outright buy this car from her and then just use it as a trade-in when I go buy the van. But because of all the headache, I've already gone to like see 11 or 12 vans. I'm kind of over it. If you're on a really tight budget, I understand. And in that case, you're gonna unfortunately have to go through the hell of dealing with private sellers, because private sellers are always going to be more of a pain in the ass than doing a deal with a dealership. Obviously, dealerships are going to try to make the maximum amount of profit from you, but they're also a lot quicker to snap up deals, meaning they're always going to be dealing with a larger volume of vehicles, which is going to give you more choice. Because if you notice, if you look on example for on Auto Trader, whenever you're looking, the majority of the listings on Auto Trader are always going to be dealers, and these dealers still list their prices competitively, but that price isn't the actual price, because they end up, when you go to the dealership, tacking on all these other prices, all these other fees that they throw on. So that's been the biggest learning curve, is dealing and managing these dealers. There's a lot of tips that I can give there as well. Obviously, it's just find the dealer that's going to be inputting the least amount of fees, who has a decent priced van, if you're going the route that I'm taking. So just something to keep in mind. I worked at a dealership years ago, and I kind of learned a lot of the ins and outs of how dealerships work. But things have changed because the internet kind of exposed a lot of the dealerships' scams, for lack of a better word. The first question that you want to ask a private seller is, are you comfortable with me test driving the car both on like a regular street and also on a highway? You want to find out that before you go look at the vehicle, because if they're not okay with test drives, you're not going to be able to really get a full feel for how the transmission and the engine are functioning. That's something to keep in mind. I learned that the hard way. I went to go look at one and they weren't really comfortable with me taking it out on the highway. So I ended up having to pass on that one. Obviously, asking if it's a clean title and if it's a clean title under their name. And if it's not under their name, like if they say, oh, this is my dad's van and I'm just selling it for him, say, will your dad be there when I go buy the van? If the actual person that's on the title is not present, I would avoid it completely. You're putting yourself in a very risky spot if something were to happen when you go transfer the title under your name. So I would just avoid those all outright if it's not under the person's name, or if the person whose name it's under isn't present. Another question you can ask too is, have you had the computer scanned on the actual van? Obviously, if they have a van, it's usually a work van, and people that have work vans generally are pretty mechanically inclined, at least mildly so. Asking them if the computer has been scanned will give you an insight into whether or not the computer or the car has any issues that it's reporting. Obviously, you're going to take your own scanner and you're going to scan the computer yourself just to be safe. But it's nice to know that before you drive an hour or 2 hours to go look at a van, that the van is potentially having some issues with the brake control module or the transmission or the anti-brake lock system. Just any sort of issues that you're running into that you know up front before you go. And if they say that no, there's no error codes, then you have a much higher likelihood of not running into issues. Obviously, they could be lying and eventually the codes will come out and then you've wasted your trip, but that's just part of the private seller process, unfortunately. Obviously, verifying that the engine that it has is the one that you want, and make sure that it's the kind of van that you want. Like if they have a Chevy Express 1500, but they listed it as a 2500, verifying, making sure, asking them to look at the title, make sure that it's a Chevy Express 2500, just to make sure that you're not wasting a trip. And it has like the 4.8 or the 5.4 or whatever kind of engine you want. This one you can kind of get a feel for, but it's not really crucial. It's asking them if they're comfortable with meeting you at a title tag, like the auto tag center, the place that you go to transfer the title for the vehicles. Asking them if they're comfortable with meeting you there so that you can go and transfer the title while they're still present, to make sure that you're not going to have any issues getting the title transferred. So that if any issues arise, you can just back out of the deal and you're safe. Usually, this is a big ask, but personally, if I was selling a vehicle, I would have no issue, especially if I was legitimate, going with the individual to an auto tag place to make sure that they have no issue transferring the title. If there's some resistance to that, then you know that that's a red flag to kind of pay attention to. Make sure that they're not pulling one over on you. Another question to ask before you go is, like, what did they do with it? Were they in construction? Did they have a pressure washing business? Were they a pool cleaner? All these questions are important, specifically for pool cleaners. What are the biggest issues with vans that I found out through a cousin of mine, my cousin Frankie? Shout out to him. He wanted a shout out on fucking YouTube. I learned from him that the big thing with pool cleaners is the Clorox or the bleach or whatever. It destroys metal, and so when they have the bleach or Clorox stored in, or the chlorine, I guess, when they have it stored in the van, and it obviously eventually is going to be leaking occasionally, that just rots the metal and it makes it rust a lot quicker, and that's why that tends to destroy vans. So it's something to keep in mind. Asking them why they're selling it, this really is more so just to gauge where they're at mentally. 9 times out of 10, the people are just going to lie to you anyways, but you can at least start to get a feel for how they speak and notice any like vocal shifts, or if they're kind of if they get nervous and clamor up when you ask that question. It's just some more information that you're kind of digging for. Because, yeah, like I said, 9 times out of 10, they're just gonna be like, yeah, the car's fine, you know, I have no issues with it, I just bought another one. Or it's like, why'd you buy another one? Oh, it's because this one's probably having some sort of issue. And when you're buying a really cheap van or an older van, you're generally gonna have issues. It's unavoidable. You might be able to get away with it for a little while, but eventually, sooner rather than later, older vans are gonna run into issues much more quickly than a newer van. So, something to keep in mind. Another thing to ask for is, can you send me a photo of the roof of the van and the VIN number of the van. So have them take a photo of the VIN on the actual windshield and of the roof of the van. The reason you want to ask for the VIN is obviously to search it, make sure there's no liens against it, make sure it's not a stolen property. And then for the roof, it's most important because these roofs tend to rust. Like probably 8 out of the 11 or 12 that I've gone to see have had terrible rust on the roof. And of course, they never advertise the roof. When they take a photo of the van, they never post a picture of the roof because it's such terrible condition. They're hoping some guy's gonna come and buy it and not inspect the roof. They're hoping to get away with it a lot of times. So they're trying to get one over on you, but if you ask for the roof before you go over there, you know this roof is rotting away and I can save myself the trip. I would avoid buying a van with rust on the roof altogether. Even a tiny bit of rust, it's going to just get worse and worse. And the surface rust that you're seeing is never going to be the worst of it. Generally, rust is very, it's very, I don't know if contagious is the right word, but it's what you're seeing on the surface is generally only the least of it. There's usually a lot more within the actual metal itself. Another question, has anybody else gone to see the van? So asking them, you know, how many people, like, have you had anybody else go see it? And if they, you know, saw it and walked away, do you know what the reason was why they walked away? That's another really good question to ask. And that's going to give you a lot of insight into why you yourself might walk away when you go look at the van. So yeah, just those are generally the questions. Obviously, I have a bunch of other stuff. I put it in my description. It's a link to the Google Doc that I use that has like all the inspection points that I look at when I go inspect a van. And yeah, once I get my van, I'll kind of I'll make a video and walk you guys through how I did an actual inspection. But that's gonna save you a lot of headache when looking at a van. And yeah, so my big plan right now, because I have like I was saying, I have a full-time job, I can afford to have some payments. I'll be treating it as if it's my rent payment. And fortunately, once I finish paying off my van, I will inevitably have a paid off vehicle that is also doubling up as my where I live and where I sleep out of. So that's going to give me a lot of comfort for at least a while in being able to travel and just kind of exploring all the other states in this country that I've never really been able to go see. I've never been further west than like New Orleans. New Orleans is probably the most west that I've ever been. And it's funny because I went to New Orleans like 7 or 8 years ago, and I just was in New Orleans to look at a van probably like 5 or 6 days ago. That's the where I went to. That was the furthest. Like I just started going up further and further west, up until New Orleans, and I ended up in New Orleans again out of nowhere because there's a place called Victory Van Sales. I went to see them. The owner's name is Greg. They have a lot of vans that have just been sitting there for a really long time. No knock at them. I know they're a dealer and they're selling their vans, but the vans that I was looking at, they had wasp nests on them, they had spider webs, and they were just not really well kept vans. And so and then they were also very overpriced for what you're getting for those vans. The argument that they were making was that because they paid X dollar, that they should be able to sell it for another amount of money. But just because you buy something for $11,000 doesn't mean that thing is worth more than $11,000. There is such thing as getting a bad deal, which there were some vans I was looking at that he paid way more than that van is worth. Allegedly, he could be lying about how much he actually paid. Obviously, dealers will lie to you about literally everything. Never trust a car salesman. Speaking to you as somebody who was a car salesman, I know a lot of the back end stuff and how shady their practices are. They'll tell you whatever they need to get you to sign that document so that they can make their commission, unfortunately. But just something to keep in mind. And you can also use it to your advantage too. So, but yeah, so the plan right now, I saw some like newer vans, like 2017 to 2021 vans with like between 40 and 70,000 miles. They're all listed usually above 20,000, and unfortunately, I'm blessed that I'm not in a hurry. If you're in a hurry, you're going to end up a lot of times making a very, very poor decision in buying a van. I'm able to wait and wait for the proper, I should say, the right deal to come to me, so that I can get the best deal. And I'm not opposed to people making money off of me. Obviously, I'm going to buy this van. I'm going to pay a fair price for it. I'm just trying to not get ripped off. Like, if I'm okay if the dealer makes like $2,000 or $1,000 or $2,000 off of me, but what bugs me is when they buy a van for $17,000, they list it for $20,000, and then on top of the $20,000 price tag that they're asking, I went to this one dealer and they sent me the out-the-door price, and they had all these crazy fees. Like, they bought the van from another person, and that van had a low jack, so they went, and on top of the $20,000 that they're charging me, which is already baked into the low jack is already baked into the price of the $20,000, they on top of that charged me $2,500 for a low jack, because the vehicle comes with a low jack. They assume that I'm going to be paying that out of my pocket because a previous. It's just, there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of shady stuff that you have to watch out for to make sure that you're not getting screwed over. And listen to your gut when you're making these deals. If a deal doesn't make sense, just walk away. And if you're not able to walk away, don't look at a van. If you're in a dire situation where you need a place to live and you're going to be planning on living out of your vehicle, I would go and get something cheap, like a 2005 or 2000 to 2010 Toyota Corolla or Camry, any little sedan. I've slept in the sedan. I slept in the sedan when I visited my family up in Tennessee. They were having we had a wedding out there. It was in this Corolla actually, and my initial plan was to take out the passenger seat and turn the passenger side into like a little bed. I ended up not doing that. It was a pain in the ass because these newer cars with all their sensors and stuff would tell you that your airbag system was failing. So I ended up not doing that, but I just took out the back seat and like the actual back part of the back seat, and I slept with my feet into the trunk, and that was relatively comfortable. I put up like a little memory foam mattress, and I slept okay. It was really cold, so I didn't sleep the best, but it was still manageable. It was still pretty good. And yeah, so that is the plan right now. I unfortunately spent, like, in my head, I thought this vision that I had for getting the van was going to be so much quicker. I thought I would already, like, today be working on building the van. But unfortunately, it's taking a little bit longer to find an actual good deal. A deal that makes sense financially. So, but we'll see. Like I said, I'm not in any hurry. So I already have everything that I need. I have all the electrical wiring. I have the battery, a 300 amp hour plus my 100 amp hour power station. So I have 400 amp hours of battery ready to go. I have two 200 watt solar panels. So that's 400 watts of solar right there. I have the charge controller. I have the battery shunt so I can measure how much battery I have on a day-to-day basis. I have the fridge. I have basically everything that I need. Like the only thing I'm missing is like the plywood and the 2x4s or whatever that I'm going to be using to build. But that I can just quickly go to Home Depot and buy. I have literally everything else that I need. I even purchased, I've never like soldered or crimped wires like for working on electrical stuff. I've never done any of that stuff. I bought a heat gun. I bought like all the tools needed to crimp wires, to cut wires, to splice wires. I bought the tool to like lock rib nuts and stuff away. I bought all the crap that I need to work on the van, and unfortunately my idea for getting the van ended up getting delayed a lot. So that's gonna put a bit of a delay on my plans. And the most frustrating part, because like if I knew for a fact like, oh, in 2 weeks I'm gonna be getting the van, it'd be like cool. But what frustrates me is like not knowing when it's going to happen, because I could, you know, tomorrow I can be talking to a dealership. They give me a great out the door price that I like. I go test drive the van. It runs great, and I purchase it, and I'm off to the races tomorrow. But that's, I don't know when it's going to happen, so it's really frustrating. It could happen in a week. It could take 2 months before I actually get one that I really want. So yeah, we'll see. That's everything I had for you guys. I just wanted to share some more tips that I've acquired through learning and doing this whole thing, so you can kind of avoid these headaches if you're taking the leap towards van life. And it's really nice because I've noticed right during COVID and right after COVID, shortly after COVID, there was a huge momentum spike in van life, like you saw with all the content creators and all the people just recognizing the freedom. I feel like there's a drop off now, like the momentum's starting to die, which is great because that's going to help a lot of the pricing situation for people that are doing this out of necessity. I'm not one of those people. I recognized a long time ago that my personality tends to favor, above all else, is mobility and freedom. Primarily freedom, but with freedom, one of the subcategories of freedom is mobility and being able to really be agile and move wherever you want. Because I noticed, like, every year I'm basically moving to a different state or a different city, and really different city. I've never moved out of state, but just moving all the time gets expensive. And if I have all my stuff in a van, and rather than having to move all my stuff to another apartment, I can just drive to a different city or drive to a different place, and now I am in essence living in this new city, and I can stay there for as long as I want. Obviously finances, dependent on my finances, but I don't have debt and I don't have a rent payment. So really my finances, I can get a job literally anywhere and be able to sustain myself pretty indefinitely. And I have a pretty impressive resume, fortunately, in the IT field, so I can generally go to any major city and get a job, and I shouldn't have an issue getting a job at any sort of service desk or anything. So it's pretty sweet. If you guys are also similar in that way, if you're not, I could probably offer some wisdom if you want to ask questions based on your personality in the comments. I might make videos of this. I had another YouTube channel where I used to teach personality theories. So it's personality-based advice. So it's really advice that's tailored to your own preferences. And I'm not going to get on a tangent because I'm about to get to the grocery store to buy some stuff. But just keep it in mind that you really have to get a feel for how your personality works. And if your personality is very resistant to the stuff that I'm doing, then it's probably that you have a higher priority of safety over freedom, and that's okay. That's not, it's personal preference, but it's just something to keep in mind, because I notice a lot of times people tend to project. When they offer you advice, they will project and interject all their own personal stuff into the advice. So they'll say you shouldn't do this because it's high risk or it's scary or it's unsafe, not taking into account that you and your personality tend to have a preference for those particular things. So yeah, something to keep in mind. Thank you guys for watching. Catch you guys on the next video.